Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. My guest today is Katherine Parker-Magyar. She's a freelance travel writer whose work has appeared in Architectural Digest, and Business Insider, The Daily Beast, tons of different professional publications. She's what I would consider a legit, or I don't know what you would call it, like professional travel writer. She's a member of the Society of American Travel Writers, the Adventure Travel Association, the Impact Travel Alliance, and much more. Monthly co-host as well of the Tripcast 360 podcast. And I'm sure many more accolades. So with that, we welcome Katherine to the podcast. How's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad we could make this happen. We've done about 200 episodes with less formally educated travel writers and digital nomads and expats, and also other people as well who are kind of like plugged into a similar scene as you. People have been to every country in the world, for example, and different travel writers. How did you kind of get your start?
So I always wanted to be a writer and I've always loved to travel. So being a travel writer when I was a kid, and even in college, it was almost like, in my opinion, almost like being a rock star. Like I didn't understand how you would go to Nepal and then write about it. And that was your job. Like I mainly wanted to be a writer. And then it took until I was 30 to really I was working in advertising. I went to grad school for writing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, if I'm not going to do it now, when will I do it? And then it really sort of took off a little bit within the first year. It was really, I feel like I got some lucky breaks, but I grew up traveling a lot with my family is insane. Like I went to all 50 states by the time I was 13. My parents took me to Alaska when I was under 2 years old. Like they just really loved to travel and they had 4 kids and were sort of like, they're going to come with us. And I've always just been motivated primarily by curiosity. There's nowhere in the world that I don't want to visit. Like I want to go everywhere. And I feel like travel is, it's so played out, that Mark Twain quote, how it's, good for humankind. It's like fatal for hatred, bigotry, narrow-mindedness. But I do find the more you travel and the more you experience different ways of life and meet other people, it expands your horizons and is really good for the human soul. So I'm happy to be working in this industry to sort of spotlight different places and communities and outfitters too that benefit the local communities, versus sort of obviously travel can have a dark side too.
Cool. So on one hand, you were kind of born into it through having adventurous parents, but on the other hand, you really only got your start as a travel writer when you kind of hit 30 plus. So that's good to hear that there's hope for the rest of us. And you've built yourself up on a number of different platforms. For example, on Twitter or X, where My Latin Life is the most active. You have 37,000 followers, which is not too shabby at all. How did you manage to build up such a presence on Twitter?
So it's funny because I feel like I have a lot of respect for people who are just bloggers because they have to build their whole audience themselves. Like I write for different publications, which helps a lot because then you have the built-in audience. And I was a high school reporter and I love having an editor and the fact checking, obviously. But one benefit of being published in a Nat Geo or something is that you do get larger exposure. And I think at the beginning, I was very hesitant to share my stories because there's nothing. I have a monthly newsletter and I cringe when I think about people reading it and reading the articles because there's still this sense of scared. It can be scary to put yourself out there. And then I think 3 months in, I was like, if I'm not going to share my stories, who's going to? And with Twitter, it was really just following a lot of travelers and a lot of writers. And I feel like with Twitter and Instagram were the two platforms that I focused on more, but Instagram is kind of a hot mess. I don't know how everyone feels about it, but that's for Instagram. And for Instagram in particular, I feel like it's a full-time job. With Twitter, it was more like I just followed a bunch of people. And then, I don't know, I would love to say I had some really cool content, but I don't think so. Like I had one post I did about Kenya that went sort of viral, which was helpful, but it's like just time consuming. And at the beginning, I think it makes sense to like invest in your website, your portfolio, your social media presences. Like you have to make yourself look legit before you feel legit. So,
hmm And for reference, everything's going to be linked in the show notes. But on Instagram, you have 13K, which is impressive if you don't buy it. And it looks like you didn't.
mm-mm. I know. I feel like I should focus more on Instagram because I'll literally be in Antarctica at the coolest places. But I feel like some of the content that performs better on Instagram is not really authentic to like how I feel I am when I'm traveling, like the front facing videos, like essentially a picture of yourself alone in the place does the best. And it's a little bit more self focused than I like to be on trips, if that makes sense. Like I have a lot of respect for influencers. I've traveled with a bunch of them, but it is like major work. And I don't know, I would like to get more Instagram followers, but at the same time, I feel like I'm kind of over it because who knows what's going on with that platform? I don't know.
hmm
I feel
And
like
you've
I've reverted
done,
back to using it for my friends in a way.
yeah, and you've done lots of podcast appearances. Not only are you a participant in the Tripcast 360 podcast, but you've guested on many other travel podcasts and different podcasts. Um, I guess I'll ask you, what with after all the appearances, what are people not asking? What should we try to get to in this episode today? What do you wish people asked you more about?
So I would love to talk a little bit about some of the adventures that I've done. I feel like sometimes people get really into like the broader view of like a destination and where to stay. And like obviously there's different types of travel writing and like motivational forces for travel. But I feel like what I've loved about like my travel through Latin America is like it has some of the most like breathtaking, insane, like natural beauty. And then it's not super expensive and just like I found the people that I've met. I mean, I still can't really, I can speak restaurant Spanish, but I didn't study Spanish in school, but I was in Peru for a couple weeks I was actually held there for a bit, but for one of the weeks, nobody spoke English. So just like the cool people I've met, I guess. And then I don't know whatever you think is interesting. I mean, for me, I feel like the Amazon and the Galapagos and stuff are the coolest stories, but
Okay, let's crack into the story then. Do you have a go-to? I don't know how to lead you off there. Do you want to hit on Galapagos or the Amazon?
yes. So I actually the first so I'm from New Jersey originally. I live in New York. So I'd been to Mexico several times and I'd been to Belize. But then my first trip to South America was to Manaus in Brazil. And I did like a week long sail. It was like to the heart of the Amazon because it's where the meeting of the rivers happens, where it's like you have the Rio Negro, which is like black and gray. And then I mean, the Amazon was one of the cooler experiences I've ever had. Number one, because it made me realize I need to invest in true travel gear. Like there are some places where everyone's like bringing their Gore-Tex and their lightweight fleeces or their like rain, and you don't really need it. But in the Amazon after the first day, I was like, I really need to up. I need to up my game because it was like it's obviously so hot and muggy and sticky during the day. But then I realized like the Amazon at night is like what makes the Amazon. Because during the day that you can hear the fruit falling from the trees, but the animals are kind of napping. And then at night we would go out on this canoe. I was at the Amazon Nature Tours and I was on the motor yacht Tucano and all of the staff were indigenous to the Amazon. So we passed through like their villages and we would be able to go visit people and they just knew everything. But going out on the canoe and then it's so pitch black, like every day that we sailed away from Manaus, no Wi-Fi, no cell service, like very disconnected. You would see Manaus in the distance as like a cloud. Eventually it looked like a tiny cloud of smoke. And then I've never seen stars like this in my life. The stars overhead were so bright and they reflected like they were pretty much magnified on the Black River. So it was like you were paddling through like a river of stars. And then all of the animals are trying to hook up. Like the loudest animals are the smallest ones, like the rats and like the frogs being like, I'm in this tree, like come visit me. It was just like the coolest experience ever. And it was interesting because my first notebook is filled with notes about the trees and all of the stuff about the nature, which is important. But then by the end, like I realized that the really cool story there were the people, and like that, I mean, it's just like fascinating, these like local communities and the mythology and the spirituality around it. And I don't know, the people that I met there were like the most fascinating and interesting. So you should go to the Amazon, but I think you should sail. I didn't even like the jungle walks by the end. Like I wanted to see a jaguar, but I was told like if I did, that would be my last moment on earth. But sailing, it was amazing.
And what was it about the gear that you felt you were missing?
So I did a trip. I think it was like 3 months later, 2 months later with REI. I did the first Asangate track, which is like up 17,000 feet, highest lodges in the world. And they outfitted us on there. And I was like, wow. And like, I still pretty much wear like a lot of REI, Helly Hansen, but I was essentially in leggings. I was in like lightweight flannels, like not really insulated jackets. You just get so sticky. And it was an eco cruise, which is what I think you should be doing. But so I know there are some expeditions on the Amazon, particularly in Peru, Love and Light to Peru, because they all compete over who has the better Amazon rainforest. I think it's Brazil because it's the largest, they have the most animals, etc. But yeah, I was sticky and uncomfortable early, and I was like, I'm an idiot. Like, there's a reason that REI is in business or like Patagonia is in business. So definitely investing in gear because everything I had was just a sweaty mess.
Okay, so instead of leggings, getting some polyester type of pants with the cargo pockets, or
Get those lightweight cargo pants that are pretty much only for hiking, that are like really thin. And then the long, you want to be in long sleeves for the bugs in the sun, like the long sleeve, waterproof, really thin button down shirts. I wish that I brought like boots, but I wish I brought rain boots like that came up to my knee, because a lot of the time that you're walking around, like the mud is like really high.
Mhm.
But yeah, all of those. And then shorts too. I mean, I packed like my LL Bean gear from camping in like college. You know, it wasn't like exactly fit for like the rainforest.
Mhm. And but the locals are just in flip flops and
Yeah,
shorts and a
people are
t-shirt.
relaxed. They're fine. I do believe that like the bugs leave you alone if you're in a certain place long enough. Or like also, I don't know, it was mainly the jungle treks and stuff, but I'm making it sound miserable. It's not as miserable. It was just like a wake up call. Like if you're going to be an adventure travel writer, like you need to get some adventure stuff. You know, I'd been on safari and things before, but it's a totally different level, like trekking through the Amazon and canoeing and fishing for piranhas than it is even like on a safari in Kenya or something where you're in the Jeep, you know, and the look, though
Mhm.
important, is like can be kind of aesthetic. Except for some animals you don't want to get, you know, some animals are drawn to certain colors, but that's a whole other aside.
Some of my tweets that do pretty well on Twitter is where I talk about my gear because I do have a specific philosophy on it, which is give you some of them, like only black t-shirts, dry fit black t-shirts, no white t-shirts, no V-necks, all black t-shirts, no logos, no sports jerseys. I only have black shorts. I have three pairs of identical black shorts. They're, like dry fit type of shorts that you could swim in, wear in the ocean. I have no khaki shorts or anything like that. And no jeans. They're just too heavy. They don't dry fast. So I only have sort of like, they're like dress pants, but they're like dry fit dress pants. So they kind of, you could wear them to a wedding, but they also are pretty like versatile. You could even wear them to the gym. Um, but it is sort of a digital nomad-ish outfit, even though I have strong philosophy on it. But I want to introduce some more like Indiana Jones type of elements to it and get some of those long sleeve shirts that are kind of popular in the South with, the like the air vent and some things
Yeah.
like that. So I think I'm moving. I'm gonna get more of a maybe I got to go to REI and check
Go to
some of the things you've
REI.
been talking about.
Honestly, I support that capsule wardrobe you just described. I think I'm so allergic to wearing black because in New York, I feel like I'm wearing black all of the time. But there is like a casual Indiana Jones look that you can rock that, that's like the khaki pants, the white. I mean, I do a lot of white or khaki button downs. Like it feels ridiculous until you're there and you're like, it's so hot, I need this. I have all these theories on safari style too, because I went on safari in Nepal and my friend was like, yeah, just wear your safari clothes that you wore like in Kenya and Rwanda. They'll be totally fine. And I go and everyone is in green. Like nobody's in any other color besides green because we're stalking tigers.
Mm.
Like they're just all these like different, there are all these different like wardrobe cues. I should do a story on that, almost exclusively on safari style. Because I feel like what I did in the Amazon was pretty much a safari. Like safari means journey in Swahili. So this conversation can be a safari, but yeah, that was pretty safari.
Any other wardrobe tips before we get back to some hard hitting stories?
You always should bring a rain jacket. Like I feel like that's obvious, but I feel like a lot of people don't really do that often. Like always bring a rain jacket. Always bring sneakers. Another thing that I feel like should be clear, but it's funny. I feel like people are so obsessed with like packing as little as possible that they sometimes will like cut out something really elemental. And then one formal outfit or formal-ish outfit that can be dressed up because you never know like what party or what restaurant or anything. A million portable chargers. Like, I mean, you can't trust that you're going to be near an outlet when your phone is dying. But yeah, rain jacket, dress, sneakers, portable chargers.
Yep, I agree with all that. Hit
Oh,
us with
and
some more.
a smaller bag that can go into your carry-on bag and expands, like one of those duffels that folds up like origami.
Yep.
And that way, if you got too much stuff on the trip, you can always like check one bag home.
Yeah, I get these on Amazon. They're it's like a backpack, but folds like almost as thin as a sheet of paper, and you can put one or two of those in, your normal carry on, and then you can whip it out, and it's kind of like a day bag that you can bring to the gym. And mine's even big enough that it fits a laptop, and it's pretty versatile.
Yeah, that's awesome. My laptop is still a pain, but I almost want to get one of the minis. But moving on.
Yeah, hit us with some stories just to like give people more of the Latin America vibe.
Yeah. So speaking of like the trip I took right after, I was on the first like Asangate trek. Asangate is like one of the highest mountains in Peru in the Andes. And basically what you do, like we start out in Cusco, go to the Sacred Valley, then you do the trek up to Machu Picchu. And from there, you take the Peru rail, which is like so chic and beautiful, to the start of the trek. And it was like 12 days, 13 days, but it was like 17,000 feet, like the highest lodges in the world. And I mean, I was lucky enough on this trip. I was with like the Minister of Culture from Peru and like these amazing guides. Speaking of people in flip flops, like so many of the Andean people that were accompanying us on this trek were literally in Adidas slides. And the rest of us are like in all of our, just trotting around. The rest of us in all of our gear, eating the cocoa leaves. Take the Diamox, I would say, if you're in Peru. Like it's over the counter altitude sickness medication. You can't get it in the US.
Okay.
But we were taking it every day. And my friend was like, I'm tough. Like, I don't need to take it. And one day he didn't take it and he woke up and he couldn't really see because we were that high up. But I
Wow.
mean, that was just spectacular. Like, pretty much it's like communism about a certain level of feet where all of the money is split within the communities. So, like, the impacts of the tourism there is like super select. Like they know not everyone is going to go up 16,000 feet to a place with no roads, no Wi-Fi, no self-service, no electricity really until you get to these individual lodges. But when you get there, you're hosted by the local people and just unbelievable food. But also, I think what was cool about the Amazon and about the trek in the Andes is that it makes such a difference when you're not on your phone and you physically cannot be on your phone. And like there are very few places in the world that don't have cell service or Wi-Fi anymore, and you have just forced to be present and read your book or write in your journal. And it was an interesting thing for me as a travel writer to see an example for where, the travel industry can be like a source of like genuine good and conservation for like the local people and the mountain, because you know what Rainbow Mountain looks like. It looks like a sand bottle on its side and it's got like different stripes like
Hmm.
yellow, pink, orange. Do you know what I'm talking about in Peru?
Yeah, the multicolor.
Yeah, if you don't Google it, because it's truly crazy. But there's this Canadian mining company that decades ago, like, had a pat. They pretty much were going to start drilling into into this mountain, which is one of the holiest mountains, like in the Andes, for oil. And then they're like, how are we going to save this mountain? And then, I was talking to Roger Valencia. I was like, we decided that the world knew what was happening, that they would be outraged. So they took out an ad, and I think it was in Etihad, where it was like, do you know where this place is? If so, we'll fly you there. And this was like a little while ago. It went completely viral. People were like, what is this place? And it gained so much like international attention that the oil company like withdrew their patent, and they were able to preserve it. And then in terms of how these communities that live so high up, like when women go into labor, they have to go further down the mountain to give birth. Like, it's really,
Wow.
and yeah, it's super isolated. And it used to be that people could like sell like the alpaca wool and stuff, but now obviously like the industry is, the world's globalization has happened. You can't make like enough money just selling that anymore. So this idea of like sponsor of like hosting this trek, and the money from the trek goes to preserving this way of life, and then it just feels like a really great like symbiotic way of honoring and preserving the culture and the landscape. So that was like one of the best trips of my life for sure.
Hmm. How many trips do you think you've done? Kind of hard to um, quantify what's a trip and what isn't a trip, but how many trips do you think you've done?
So I've been to 87 or 86 countries, I think. I do know, but I feel like it's hard. Some countries are labeled countries and then not countries all the time, but I traveled pretty much nonstop from 2018 to 2020, like right when my career took off, which I think is good advice. Like, suddenly, like, I was getting all these opportunities from editors and like to travel. And I was like really excited. So for me, like, I would go like Kenya, China, Arizona, Switzerland, like, just, I was truly Magellan everywhere. It's like I knew the plague was coming. So I'm happy I did a lot of those trips then. And then now I'll try to do a big trip a quarter. Like last fall, I did like India, Cambodia, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Thailand all together. So, but it totally, I don't know, I've probably been on assignment like 60 plus times, which is crazy.
On
It sounds
assignment,
exhausting. I think so. Yes.
60 assignments.
I mean, I've written more than that amount of stories, but
And when you say career, is the what would you say your career is?
as a journalist, as a travel writer.
Journalist.
hmm
Are journalist and travel writer different things?
No, I mean, I feel like a journalist and a reporter and a travel writer, they're the same thing, unless you're writing exclusively like travel inspired fiction. But I think where people get really strict about it is like journalists versus bloggers, where there's like this sort of the ethical element of having an editor, having everything be fact checked, having that sort of credibility. But I mean, I think what can be hard is that now, obviously, with the internet, you can really say anything you want, and you can have a huge platform, and some of the things like aren't necessarily going to be true. And I mean, I just noticed that sometimes when I'm going somewhere pretty remote and I'm doing research, and like I was researching Dominica, this island in the Caribbean, and
Hmm.
the I didn't find that many stories on it. And the one I ended up reading a blog that was saying how unsafe it is and how dangerous it is and all this violence. And that just wasn't the situation there really at all. Like, I think there can be an element of, I think that what's great about travel blogging is that it can be like very evocative and first person, and that's like my favorite type of travel journalism. I just think there's like a difference in the sense of like the integrity of the piece, which
Hmm.
comes with having an editor and having a publication behind it.
Hmm.
But obviously, like, we need more editors, we need more writers. Like, it's a crazy time in the industry.
Why do we need more?
Because I believe that writers are like really integral to like a democracy, to like sharing information, to having a free press. Like if you look at places that really do not have like freedom or like individual liberty, or it's places that is like essentially only state-owned media. I think you need writers like you need teachers. Like it's communicators, it's storytelling, it's sharing information. And I think that the fact that those are two of like the lowest paid professions is like quite insane. Like, I don't think we necessarily need more investment bankers. I do think that like we need more journalists.
Well, a lot of people are definitely losing their cushy white collar jobs now due to AI, and actually, it's something we've been talking about on Twitter a little bit. Is just how hard it is now to get a job on LinkedIn and this kind of thing. So maybe there is room for people to transition to becoming full time travel writers if they can. I don't know if they can get the gigs. So, what advice would you have to someone that wants to do what you've done? This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Crema Social. Crema Social is like TikTok for international dating. It's an app you can download right now on your phone, and 3 out of 4 people on Crema are single women. The app was founded in Colombia, so unsurprisingly, there are a lot of Latinas on the app, by the way. So, how does it work? Crema Social is a social meal experience where you invite a hot girl for a lunch date via video call and food delivery. New concept, so you'll have to try it out for yourself, but this is probably the best way to meet Latinas before you visit the country. So if you're in Latin America or planning to visit Latin America, download Crema Social now and start getting dates right away. There will be a link in the description to download, or just search Crema Social on your favorite app store. Have fun, guys. This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Bit Refill. Bit Refill is the best way to spend your crypto in Latin America. Purchase gift cards or mobile refills from more than 3,500 brands in 186 countries instantly, safely, and privately. You can also apply the code MyLatinLife at checkout to get 10% back on your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you in part by Job Stacking. If you are a remote or hybrid worker looking to maximize your earning potential, then Rolf Holtze, the author of Job Stacking, guarantees you'll be able to double your income. This is the exact system Rolf has used to take his own income and those of many others beyond $20K a month. So what is job stacking? It's this idea of working multiple remote jobs. You might have heard Rolf, he's worked 5, 7, even 9 remote jobs at the same time before. And by the way, job stacking works equally well for non-technical roles. So no, it's not just for the nerds. So if you're ready to job stack, then book a discovery call with Job Stacking and see how they can double your income in just 9 weeks. In the show notes in the description, there will be a link where you can book a call directly on the Calendly of Job Stacking and be talking with them as early as tomorrow about how to double your income as quickly as possible.
So I have 2 pieces of advice that I think are really helpful. The first is like, I think are really helpful. Like I'm not biased, but the first is like reach out to your local newspapers and like getting a byline somewhere that I think if you can blog every day, great. If you can like run your own, like publish your own stories and run your own platform and get the audience there, it's, as I mentioned, its own other career. But like usually like if you look into like your local newspapers, local magazines, there are oftentimes like that is like a lower barrier of entry, regional publications versus national, and you can get great bylines there. And also it's like I said earlier with that sort of air of credibility, like if you get a piece published, like add it to your website, and then when you're pitching an editor, you have a website and you have an example story. And then also you don't need to travel like across the world and go on the most insane trip to have a great story. Like you can literally write about your town. Particularly now, I feel like with the pandemic, things shifted years ago. things also shifted to focusing more on like places in America that are underdiscovered, or there's something, no matter where you are in the world, there's something cool about it. I mean, I've been to all 50 states and there's something cool about every single state, but you know, you don't need to, I think it could be hard to be like, I'm going to be a travel writer, but I can't get myself to like China. It's like, you don't need to, like, you can start travel writing about regional areas and also just pursue what's interesting to you. Like for travel was always something that I was really interested in. But I also will write about like culture and like politics and like books and stuff. And at the beginning, when I was first starting out as a full-time journalist, I was just pitching all kinds of stories too. And also like, I think sometimes there's this emphasis on knowing exactly what your beat will be and self-defining really early in your career, when I think usually it just sort of comes, you're going to learn what you love by doing what you love. And also you can't really fake enthusiasm. So if you think something's really cool, or if you're in a meeting, or if you're excited or passionate about a story or a place or an idea, like share that. Like I've found that being like unabashedly, sincerely excited and grateful has helped a lot, you know, because I think that sometimes people can get jaded or a little bit
Sure.
like you forget, you know. So I try to remind myself I'm lucky to have this profession. But when I was really early in my career and I thought, you know, my first trip was Kauai, it was so cool. And people appreciate that. And it doesn't matter also, you don't need to wait till you're in the New Yorker to like write something really good. Like it's the internet, like people will read it. And if you're pitching it to an editor, like, and you share a clip, they're going to read that. So I think sometimes people can get defeated like, oh, well, like this is a smaller publication, or this isn't like, you know, Condé Nast Traveler. But at the end of the day, like not only do the editors want to see your writing style, but like it's probably going to reach the people that you're writing about too. Like one of my first travel stories was for the Daily Beast about Tunisia, like Sidi Bou Said. I was like, forget Santorini, go to this blue and white city. And I actually went there after a breakup with my mom and sister, and I framed it that way. And then next thing you know, I had all these emails. I was interviewed by The Economist, Tunisian, by The Diplomat in the Maghreb. Like the article really resonated with people. So the cool thing about the internet and like having your stuff be available online is it will reach a larger audience.
Hmm.
And don't get discouraged. Like send a million pitches. Like now I'm at a point where I get a lot of pitches from publicists, and sometimes some of them I really am able to use, but then you're not able to respond to all of them all of the time. Like you have to have a thick skin. You can't take it as a personal rejection if your story is passed on. Like some of my best stories were passed on a ton before they were taken, and then they were my great stories. And then if you have stories that you want to tell that you haven't yet, like I want to do a book, like just have a way to file your memories or your ideas. Although I found like they'll stay, if it's impactful, it's going to stay with you. But yeah.
Okay. So you said kind of start with regional publications or smaller ones, build a byline, and work your way up to larger publications. What's a byline, by the way?
So it's like a byline is like Black Rivers and Pink Dolphins, like a guide to the Amazon by Katherine Parker-Magyar. So that's my byline. So there are like people in the travel industry and editors are like reading these travel stories, like on the hunt for like new writers. But that way, when you reach out to like an editor at like Travel and Leisure, you could say, my name is Catherine. I have been published in XYZ. Like, here are my articles, just to show that, you know, you can write. Someone else has entrusted you with writing before. But yeah, it snowballs. Like the more stories that you write, the more people will approach you about stories and the more you'll be on people's radar.
Okay. And how does someone go about pitching stories or pitching publications? You pitch a specific idea, or what makes a good pitch?
Yeah, a specific idea, like a story, like an angle that you're interested in. So, you know, a blurb essentially. People have different thoughts. Like sometimes I'll send a longer pitch that is like 2 paragraphs, it's in depth, and one had like one longer pitch. But then other times I'll just send like three. If I know an editor is interested in like ski stories and I've got like three cool stories in mind, I'll do like a sort of overview of each one. And, you know, I've had success with both of those types of approaches, but I know a lot of editors prefer brevity. So just trying to find, I mean, that's where you have to be a good writer. And sometimes I hate pitching. It's like, I know this story is really good. How do I communicate that in 3 sentences? How do I like distill the essence of this thing without all those filler words?
Okay.
So
And what's the outcome that you're looking for? Are you asking for a specific rate, or are you asking for money, or are you just saying, "Hey, will you publish this if I write it?" Or what are you trying to?
So it's hard you're really running your own business. I mean, I created an LLC like a year ago, and I feel like I still do not know fully how to operate everything. But what's wonderful about my job is that I am my own boss and I do what I love and I'm like inspired by what I do. I don't have the existential dread I used to have like at my desk job. But you are also responsible now in a different way for like your rates and like hounding, make sure you're getting paid on time. And like there isn't a lot of transparency between what editors pay each writer. So at the beginning, I mean, I was writing for very little money and I was writing for like smaller, like luggage brands, whatnot, because I was building up my portfolio and my bylines so that you could see like, so that my body of work was out there. And then as I've continued on in my career, my rates have increased, but it's just a fact of the matter that sometimes like the best publications will have lower rates because they're like, well, you're in this publication, you're going to say no to this, versus other smaller publications or brand publications, because of our capitalist society, will have higher rates. So yeah, you're looking to get assigned a story by them. And then you have like a discussion after that.
Okay. And if I write a story about climbing a mountain in Peru and the mishaps and how I got vertigo or whatever, how much can I expect to be paid and how for the
That
article?
totally depends. It can be anywhere from like over 1,000 to like under 100. Like it totally depends. It's very much not, it's not like a clear process. And it depends publication, print versus digital, all this stuff.
And how can I get those $1,000+ paychecks? Who's paying $1,000 and what are they looking for?
I mean, usually it'll be more with print publications or something that is owned by a brand, be it like an airline or like, so like content writing is something that a lot of travel writers do. So it's like, that'll be like a totally different section than journalism. It's more like, here is like a summary of the top flights that American Airlines is doing, So you can like work for on that side as well with content writing. But people are pretty church and state. But it depends. I don't know. I mean, if you get in the industry, you talk to other writers and people are pretty upfront, at least with my friends, it's like a tribe and we'll be like, oh, they pay really well or they pay really quickly or they have really good. So that's sort of how you also learn. There isn't a ton of transparency around it because it's a ton of freelance journalists. So
Hmm. Yeah, so it sounds like sometimes you're writing for the magazine themselves and sometimes you're writing for brands. Those are kind of the two groups of people who are looking for travel writing articles.
no, I'll have like clients that like I'll advise and consult for, like in terms of from like a travel and tourism perspective, and like
Yeah,
travel
tourism boards
agencies.
sometimes pay people and
Hmm.
stuff too,
Well,
right?
I mean, the thing is like if you go to 86 countries, like you are going to have a wealth of knowledge that like regular people aren't just not going to have in terms of like comparing different places. You have insights into the industry. So, I mean, some of like the most business savvy journalist friends I know are really good at monetizing that, and that's something that I feel like hopefully you continue to grow with your career, but it is always a hustle. So it's nice to have like a steady paycheck via different clients, like that you retain, like via contract or whatnot.
Mm. And you mentioned having a beat, which I assume is like a specific niche or angle
Mhm.
to your type of travel writing. What would you say your beat is if you have one?
I would say adventure, culture, and like far flung destinations, like sort of the combination of the three. So, like adventure travel writing, that like I find a lot of adventure writing, like, I mean, I'm not like climbing Everest, but like, those sort of like the tiger safari in Nepal or like, you know, sailing to the heart of the Amazon or like island hopping in the Galapagos or I don't know, all of these places.
Okay.
That like hiking in the Himalayas, like you can have like and the where that intersects with like the culture. So like writing a lot about people, writing a lot about the communities. I often find the people I meet tend to be like the story. usually, because it's the most fascinating part, I think, is always like meeting new people. And then in terms of like luxury, like I'm not going to be, I feel like when I'm traveling on my own and growing up traveling, like I feel like there's a whole market with budget travelers and solo travelers. And then the mid road, I feel like is also covered. Like there are some people who just, they don't care where they are in the world as long as they've got sort of the same amenities that they'd expect at like a Marriott Bonvoy. But so that's where like the luxury comes in, and like writing about those like bucket list experiences, basically like covering like everyone's like a bucket list trip, dream
Sure.
vacation.
And we talked about the Galapagos, or you referenced it a couple times there, and that's obviously part of Latin America, being part of Ecuador. What went down in Galapagos?
So I wrote about staying. I stay at the Picaya Lodge, which is like a 5-star. It's like a Relayan Chateau retreat, and it is. I mean, it was one of the best places I've ever stayed in my life. But it was a cool angle because I feel a lot of people in the Galapagos cruise from island to island. So we were with. It was pretty much like a 10 or 7 day adventure. For me, it was like a dream. Like there's nowhere. It's like there's nowhere really like the Galapagos. Antarctica, kind of, because like the penguins walk right up to you. But like it's pretty spectacular if you love animals, obviously. But like seeing, it's really inspiring how Ecuador has like managed to like preserve these islands for so long. And like America is so much richer, and like we have a harder time, sort of
Hmm.
like it's crazy how much like the people, and that credits the government for putting it a priority. Like, but I mean, we were swimming. I got my scuba diving license right after this because I was like, I need to stay under this. Like, what's going on? But like, I jumped in the water and a sea lion came, a huge bull sea lion, like 500 pounds, came swimming right up to me. And like, I don't know, this guy, he calls himself Galapagos champion because he claims he's a champion. He's like, oh, he's dancing with you. But like, I can't even explain to you like how insane that is for a sea lion to come right at you in the sea. Like, it's like this crazy alternate universe where animals weren't taught to fear humans. Like I was sitting on the dock at near like a fish market, but I was just chilling on this dock, and a seal is like 50, I don't know, 20 nautical feet in the water, and it's looking at me. I'm sort of looking at it, and it swims up to the dock, and I'm
Hmm.
like, that's weird. Walks to the edge of the dock and like sits down next to me. And then one of the naturalists was like, oh my God, you can't get too close. And then people are like, he like approached me and just hung out. Like I can't even, I watched a crab eat a fish. And like I'm telling you, like it was having its dinner right next to me. And like it's just the access you got to these animals. It's a crazy alternate universe where like we aren't like immediately identified as predators. So I really want to go back there and scuba dive because I want to do the sharks situation. But just schools of fish, like tens of thousands, like fish everywhere. I can't even explain. It's really spectacular.
Wow. And if you had to give some recommendations of places in Latin America that people should check out, what would be maybe your bucket list or top five? Or
Um, like destinations to check out.
sure.
Um, I would say like everyone is always like Machu Picchu, but Machu Picchu is amazing. But Machu Picchu to Rainbow Mountain, if you can hike up to Rainbow Mountain, like I know it's a pain, but I feel like it's totally cheating taking the bus with your people have their little respirators, like handheld oxygen tanks, and they look like they're dying. And then it's sort of crowded at this one spot, like facing the mountain directly, but then you turn a corner and no one is there again. Like if you have the chance to hike in the Andes, I really recommend that Asangate trek with Andean lodges. And then in terms of just like Latin America, I'm obsessed with Panama City. I think it's like one of the most romantic cities in the world. And I
Really?
stayed, oh my God, it's amazing. I stayed in this like amazing hotel that I'm now like, what was it called? I'm going to have to give it to you if I can't find
In
it.
the historic center?
Uh huh. Um, it is, I'm going to have to find it for you, but I'm dying that I can't find it right now because
I,
it's literally one of
I
my
spent a
favorite.
lot of time in Panama City. I like it. I defend it actually.
People are
To
insulting it.
Yeah, people insult it. I'll defend it. I've never heard someone call it particularly romantic, but I can see
Oh
it.
my
Why would
God.
you say that that is?
The like cobblestone streets, like the ancient architecture, like that. just the energy of the city, like where people are just like drinking rum outside at the friendly. I don't know. I really love Panama. I actually like Panama. I love Belize too. I always feel like I'm cheating, but I think Panama is my favorite
Favorite country?
country in Central America.
Wow.
I feel like Panama is what people think. I mean, I love Costa Rica too. I really like the W Costa Rica, and I don't usually like big brand hotels, but the W is like one of the most beautiful places I've stayed, and like surfing in Tamarindo, yes, was sick. I'm finding the name of this place.
It's all
Where
good.
where are we? Um but yeah, so Panama City for sure. And then I would say Galapagos is obviously super, like it's a bucket list thing for a reason. Oftentimes I find like places like the Great Wall of China or like the Masai Mara, like, oh, it's La Campagna Hotel in Panama City. They're like iconic for a reason. And then obviously the Amazon, I think, a 7-day sail, but you can even do 3-day sails from Manaus. Manaus is a very cool city. It's called like the Paris of the tropics. Like the rubber industry was huge in the 1800s. So it's this crazy juxtaposition of like this sort of like parts of it can be really run down. It's in the middle of the rainforest and then this crazy opulent architecture. And a lot of people who live in Manaus are Amazonian, like come from different communities within the Amazon rainforest. So it's like a totally different culture than like any other part of South America.
Mhm.
Um, Belize, I was in Hopkins Village. I mean, Belize was like really cool because we went to this village that's like now like preserved by the Garifuna tribe, who were like the first. They were Africans who came to the Caribbean before white settlers came. So they were able to flee from the Caribbean to Central America before like the slavers arrived. And they like that culture is like still like thriving in parts of like Belize, Honduras. That was fascinating.
Mhm.
Going to in Panama has like 7 indigenous populations, and going to Portobello, which has the huge Congolese influence, which is crazy because I went right from Rwanda sort of to Panama, and I was like, this art looks similar, this music sounds similar, and it's because a lot of people from Central Africa um, are now living in Panama. So what else? Mexico, I love tequila. Mexico, like where you can, I love the hotel in Tequila, Mexico too. I just love the like Latin American hacienda type places, like Hotel del Parque in Guayaquil, in Ecuador, wherever I was in the Sacred Valley that I know was really cool. All these names, that's like one thing. I can remember like the essence of a place, but before I'm writing a story, I'm like, let me like drill down on exactly where I was staying.
I guess that's the benefit of writing about it, is you can
Yeah.
remember things a little bit better.
And Patagonia was really cool. I was in Ushuaia. We sailed from Ushuaia to Antarctica. So it's like the southernmost, the last city on Earth, essentially, before you get down to Antarctica. But Patagonia was so spectacular. And we did some hiking there and unbelievable crabs, great crab shacks. But I know I want to go back and do like a longer hike. And I never talked about Chile. I'm obsessed with Chile. That I really love Santiago. It's so fun. And then they have these like vineyard, like Vic Vineyard is like one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life. Like the Chilean wine region is insane. It gets
Mhm.
overlooked by the Malbec in Argentina.
Mhm.
So I feel like I've been to a decent amount of places, but like I know there's still so many places I need to go to. But
That's good. I like the rapid fire of getting a bunch of places in there, giving people some ideas as we get to wrapping up the episode. Of course, links to your profiles will be in the show notes if people want to reach out to you. But as we get to wrapping up, do you want to maybe share a final message with the audience regarding, I guess, whatever you want to, whatever we've been bouncing around between talking about travel writing as well as just cool destinations and stories. But I'll give you kind of a space to give a last word here.
well, I think for traveling, I feel like my biggest piece of advice is I'll talk to a lot of people, and this was before I was a professional travel writer, because now it's like, oh well, it's rich coming from you saying this. But I remember thinking like you had to save up so much money and have the perfect amount of time Like I can't go somewhere for less than 10 days. I need to be staying here if I go there. But I feel like people oftentimes put off like amazing experiences waiting for it to be just the right time. And it's never going to be. And also it's usually going to be less expensive than you think as well. And just like sort of booking it and going for it. Because particularly if you're traveling from the US, it is crazy how America is more expensive than a lot of these places. And you can stay in nice places and like support the local economy and not basically. I'm saying don't wait until your like honeymoon or your retirement to take the trips that you want to take. There are ways to make it happen. And then with travel writing, if people love to travel or love to write, like just go for it. I mean, it's definitely like a tough industry, but I do think that it's easier to do like the 10,000 hours and do the work if you like what you're doing. And if you do love to travel, I think that's like a gift, because I think everyone says they love to travel, but then they actually don't. Like they get really overwhelmed at the airport, or they're very particular. If you're someone who genuinely does enjoy like getting outside of your comfort zone and, learning new things, seeing the world, like there are a lot of avenues to do it professionally, like not just travel journalism, but like the travel PR industry, the travel business side, like there's like huge like parts now with like within tourism bureaus with like artistic heritage, cultural heritage, like there are just different ways to participate. So I think people definitely should go for it.
Thank you. That's great advice. So, as we get to wrapping up, wherever you're listening to this podcast, dear audience, maybe it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, X, YouTube, please be sure to subscribe. We drop 2 episodes a week with amazing guests just like Katherine, and you won't want to miss an episode. So please please leave a comment, let us know that you enjoyed the episode. But without further ado, this has been another episode of My Latin Life podcast. Again, our guest today, Katherine Parker-Magyar. Thank you to Katherine for joining us, and thank you to the audience for listening. Ciao for now.
Thank you.
Hey guys, quick note at the end of the episode here. If you made it this far, you might be interested in working with My Latin Life personally to make progress on your internationalization plan. So whether the next step for you is getting residency in Latin America, lowering your taxes, choosing the best country, maybe a little birth tourism, whatever the next step is for you, of course, My Latin Life can help. We've helped people in their 20s, their 40s, their 60s, because I truly believe that Latin America has something to offer people at every stage of life. So if you want to become our VIP client, if you want to work with Vance, myself directly, book a call. There will be a link in the description. There will be a small fee for the initial consultation, and we do that to filter out the time wasters and focus on the best of the best clients. But if you're listening to this podcast and you made it all the way through the episode, I know you're the best of the best. But we're ready to work with you. So book that call. Hope you enjoyed this episode of the My Latin Life podcast, and we'll catch you in the next one.